Princess Lyra stood in the great hall of the Velkari Palace, her crystalline skin gleaming under the lights of 3 suns. The council of elders sat before her in a half-circle, their ancient faces carved with disapproval. Today was the day she would change everything. "I will not marry," Lyra announced, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Not Prince Vex of the Drayan Consortium, not any alliance candidate, not anyone chosen by politics and trade agreements." The oldest elder, Counselor Mara, rose from her seat. "Princess, you are young. Only 247 years old. You do not understand the weight of empire." "I understand perfectly," Lyra replied. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept them at her sides. "I watched my mother fade away in a marriage she never wanted. I watched her smile for the cameras while dying inside. I will not repeat her fate." Emperor Torin, her father, sat on his throne with his head in his hands. He looked older than his 612 years. "Daughter, this alliance would protect our outer colonies. The Drayan Consortium controls half the trade routes in this sector. Then we find another way," Lyra said. She walked to the center of the hall, where an ancient ceremonial blade rested on a stone pedestal. "I invoke the Oath of Steel." "Ever!" Gasps filled the chamber. The Oath of Steel was ancient, rarely used, and considered extreme even by Velkari standards. Once sworn, it could not be broken. Lyra picked up the blade. It was cold in her hand, heavy with tradition. "I swear by my blood and my honor that I will rule alone. Only one who can best me in combat, outwit me in strategy, and truly understand, my heart will ever stand beside me as an equal. And since no such being exists, I will remain unwed." She drew the blade across her palm. Purple blood, the color of Velkari nobility, dripped onto the stone floor. The oath was sealed. Her father closed his eyes. The council erupted in angry voices, but it was done. Lyra had chosen her path, and by Velkari law, no one could force her to break a blood oath. Halfway across the galaxy, Tae Yang wiped grease from his hands and examined the engine core of the human colony ship. Horizon's Promise. The hyperspace stabilizer had been making a strange noise for 3 days, and he had finally found the problem. A loose coupling, nothing serious, but it could have become dangerous if left unchecked. "All fixed?" his sister Jiwoo called from the pilot's cabin. "Yeah, we're good," Taeyang replied. He climbed out from under the engine housing and stretched his back. At 32 years old, he was starting to feel these long repair sessions in his joints. Jiwoo appeared in the doorway, her flight suit covered in coffee stains. "Good. Because we have a new assignment. Supply run to Velkar Prime." Taeyang raised his eyebrows. "The Velkari homeworld? That's a big deal. They barely tolerate humans in their space. Which is why the pay is excellent," Jiwoo said with a grin. "We deliver medical supplies and machine parts. Stay respectful. Don't make eye contact with any nobles. And get out." "Simple. Nothing's ever simple," Taeyang muttered, but he was already running pre-flight calculations in his head. The Velkari were a proud warrior race, with crystalline skin and telepathic powers. They lived for over 800 years, and viewed humans as primitive children. Working in their territory meant walking on eggshells. The next day, Horizon's Promise crossed into Velkari space. Everything went smoothly, until Jiwoo picked up a distress signal. "Taeyang, I'm getting a code-red emergency broadcast," she said, her fingers flying over the control panel. "It's a Velkari royal transport under attack by pirates." Taeyang moved to her side and studied the readings. 3 pirate vessels, heavily armed, were surrounding a smaller diplomatic ship. The royal transport's shields were failing. "We should jump away," Jiwoo said quietly. "Interfering could violate their territorial protocols. They might see it as an insult." Taeyang watched the screen as weapons fire lit up the darkness of space. Inside that ship were living beings who would die if no one helped them. He thought about protocols and politics for exactly 3 seconds. "Set intercept course," he said. "Are you crazy?" "Probably. but I can't watch people die because of paperwork. He moved to the weapons console. Horizon's Promise was not a warship, but it had basic defensive systems, and one advantage. It was small and fast. Jiwoo hesitated for only a moment, then her hands moved across the controls. I hope you know what you're doing. Me too, Taeyang admitted. The small human vessel dropped out of hyperspace directly between the pirates and their target. Taeyang immediately activated every sensor, scrambler, and electronic countermeasure they had. To the pirates' instruments, it looked like a military escort had arrived. This is the Earth vessel Horizon's Promise. Taeyang broadcast on all channels. You are attacking a diplomatic transport in violation of galactic law. Withdraw immediately or face consequences. It was a bluff. The pirates could have destroyed them easily, but pirates were bullies, and bullies usually backed down when they thought they faced real opposition. The three ships hesitated, then broke off their attack and jumped to hyperspace. Taeyang let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Jiwoo, hail the royal transport. The communication channel opened, and a face appeared on the screen. Taeyang had never seen a Valkyrie up close before. The woman's skin seemed to be made of crystal facets that caught the light, creating rainbow patterns. Her eyes were a deep violet color, intelligent and intense. This is Princess Lyra of the Valkyrie Empire, she said. Her voice carried both authority and surprise. You are human. Yes, Your Highness, Taeyang replied, trying to remember the proper respectful tone. Engineer Taeyang of the colony ship Horizon's Promise. Is your crew safe? Lyra studied him through the screen. Taeyang felt an odd sensation, as if she was looking into him rather than at him. It made him uncomfortable. We are unharmed thanks to your intervention, Lyra said slowly. Why would humans risk their lives for strangers? Your people are not known for such actions. The statement stung, but Taeyang understood where it came from. Humans had a rough reputation in the galaxy. Built from centuries of wars and mistakes on Earth, because it was the right thing to do, he answered simply. Lives are lives, regardless of species. Something shifted in Lyra's expression. The telepathic pressure Taeyang had felt suddenly lifted. You are unusual, human. Protocol demands I offer you proper thanks. Will you accept an invitation to the palace? Jiwoo made a strangled sound from the pilot's seat. An invitation to the Valkyrie Palace was unprecedented for humans. It was either a great honor or a very polite trap. Taeyang met Lyra's eyes through the screen. He saw curiosity there, and something else he couldn't quite identify. We would be honored, Princess. As the communication ended, Jiwoo turned to her brother. What did we just get ourselves into? Right, Taeyang looked out at the stars. I have no idea. The Valkyrie Palace made Taeyang feel very small. The ceilings stretched so high they disappeared into shadow, and every surface gleamed with precious metals and crystals. Valkyrie nobles walked past without looking at the human crew, their crystalline skin reflecting the light like moving rainbows. They're staring at us without staring at us, Jiwoo whispered. I can feel it. Taeyang nodded. The telepathic Valkyrie didn't need to look directly at someone to observe them. He could feel their minds brushing against his thoughts like curious fingers, though they couldn't read him clearly. Human minds were apparently too different, too chaotic for easy telepathic reading. A tall Valkyrie man approached them. His crystal skin had a darker tone, almost like obsidian. I am Ambassador Kale, he said. His words were polite, but his tone dripped with contempt. The princess has requested your presence, though I cannot imagine why. We're honored by her invitation, Taeyang replied carefully. Kale's lip curled. Yes, well, the princess has always had peculiar interests. He gestured for them to follow. Try not to embarrass your species too much while you're here. The throne room was even more impressive than the halls. Princess Lyra sat on a raised platform, wearing robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. She looked different in person, more real somehow. Her violet eyes fixed on Taeyang as he entered. Engineer Taeyang, she said. Welcome to Velkar Prime. He bowed, hoping it was the right gesture. Thank you for your hospitality, Princess. The hospitality is the least I can offer to those who saved my life, Lyra replied. She stood and walked down from the platform, much to the visible shock of the nobles present. Princesses apparently didn't walk among common visitors. I would like to hear more about human culture and thinking. Before Taeyang could respond, KL stepped forward. Your Highness, perhaps we should test whether the human's rescue was truly skill or merely fortunate accident. After all, we wouldn't want to praise them for luck. Lyra's eyes narrowed. What do you suggest, Ambassador? The war games begin in 3 days, Kale said with a thin smile. Let the human participate. If he survives even one trial, we'll know there's more to his species than we thought. The room went silent. The war games were brutal tests designed for Velkhari warriors with superhuman strength, telepathic powers, and centuries of training. Humans were fragile by comparison, living less than 100 years, unable to read minds or regenerate injuries. That's hardly fair, Lyra began, but Taeyang interrupted her. I accept. Jiwoo grabbed his arm. Are you insane? They'll kill you. No one said it was a fight to the death, Taeyang said, looking at Kale. Just a test of skill, right? Kale's smile widened. Of course. Merely a test. Over the next 3 days, Taeyang studied everything he could about the war games. Jiwoo thought he was suicidal. But Taeyang had learned one thing in his years as an engineer. Every problem had a solution, if you looked at it from the right angle. The first trial was the combat maze. A massive structure filled with deadly traps, shifting walls, and automated weapons. Contestants had to reach the center crystal and return alive. Most Velkhari completed it through a combination of telepathic sensing, physical prowess, and quick reflexes. Taeyang stood at the entrance with 20 Velkhari warriors. They towered over him, their crystalline bodies gleaming with confidence. When the gates opened, they charged forward with supernatural speed. Taeyang walked. He studied the walls as he moved, looking for patterns. The maze wasn't random, it was a machine. And machines followed rules. He noticed the slight variations in the stone color that indicated pressure plates. He saw the almost invisible seams where panels would slide open to release traps. While the Velkhari warriors fought their way through with strength and telepathy, Taeyang moved slowly and carefully, avoiding triggers rather than surviving them. He calculated angles and weight distribution. When he encountered a corridor blocked by an energy barrier, he didn't try to break through. Instead, he examined the power conduits and found an access panel. 3 minutes of careful rewiring, and the barrier shut down permanently. He reached the center crystal, claimed it, and began his return journey. By now, he understood the maze's logic. The traps weren't designed to kill. They were designed to test combat skills, but there was a maintenance path, a way for technicians to service the maze without triggering everything. Taeyang found it and followed it straight to the exit. He emerged to find Lyra and the entire court staring in shock. He had completed the maze in record time, and he wasn't even breathing hard. How? Kale demanded. I'm an engineer, Taeyang said simply. I solve mechanical problems. The second trial came 2 days later. A holographic war simulation where contestants commanded fleets against each other. Taeyang's opponent was Princess Lyra herself. She was brilliant. Taeyang watched as she deployed her forces with centuries of tactical knowledge. She used classic Velkhari strategies, overwhelming force combined with telepathic coordination. It should have crushed him in minutes, but Taeyang didn't fight the way she expected. He split his forces into tiny groups that scattered in every direction. When she pursued one group, another would strike at her supply lines. He used guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, and psychological warfare that humans had perfected over thousands of years of conflict. Lyra adapted quickly, but Taeyang kept changing his approach. When she defended against one strategy, he switched to another. He used tactics from ancient Earth, from wars the Velkhari had never heard of. He made her fight on human terms instead of Velkhari terms. The simulation ended in a stalemate. Neither side could claim victory. The court erupted in whispers. No one had ever fought Princess Lyra to a draw. After the trial, Lyra found Taeyang alone on a balcony, overlooking the city. That was impressive, she said, joining him at the railing. You were better, Taeyang replied honestly. I just made it messy enough that you couldn't use your full advantage. Exactly, Lyra said. She turned to look at him. You think differently than we do. Not better or worse, just different. It's refreshing. They stood in silence for a moment. Finally, Taeyang asked, Why did you take that oath? The one about never marrying? Lyra's expression darkened. Because I watched my mother live in a cage. A beautiful, golden cage called marriage. She was powerful, brilliant, and she spent 300 years being someone's political asset instead of her own person. That sounds terrible, Taeyang said quietly. You understand. Lyra looked surprised. Most people tell me I'm being childish or rebellious. They say duty requires sacrifice. Duty shouldn't require you to sacrifice who you are, Taeyang said. He thought about his own life. The choices he'd made. Humans have a saying, you only live once. We mean it literally because our lives are so short, but even with all the time you have, you still only get one life. It should be yours. Lyra stared at him. In that moment, something shifted between them. It was subtle, like the first crack in a frozen lake. But it was real. The final trial is tomorrow, she said softly. Combat against Champion Roth. He's undefeated in 200 years. I know. You could withdraw. No one would think less of you. You've already proven yourself. Taeyang smiled. No. I need to finish what I started. Besides, I'm curious to see what happens. Lyra wanted to say more, but footsteps approached. Ambassador Kale appeared. His expression cold. The council wishes to speak with you, Princess. About the Drayan situation. As Lyra left, she glanced back at Taeyang. There was worry in her eyes, and something else. Something that made Taeyang's heart beat faster despite himself. Tomorrow, he would face a warrior who could probably break him in half. But tonight, standing under alien stars, Taeyang realized he'd already encountered something far more dangerous than any combat trial. He was beginning to care about the princess who swore she'd never take a husband. The combat arena was packed with thousands of Velkhari spectators. Taeyang stood in the center, feeling very small and very human. Across from him, Champion Roth looked like a living statue carved from dark crystal. He was nearly 7 feet tall, his body covered in decorative scars that marked his victories. You are brave, human, Roth said, his voice like grinding stone. But bravery will not save you, the horn sounded. Roth moved faster than Taeyang thought possible. One moment the champion was across the arena. The next his fist was whistling toward Taeyang's head. Taeyang barely dodged, feeling the wind of the blow pass his ear. He rolled away, his mind racing. Direct combat was suicide. Roth's crystalline skin was nearly unbreakable. His strength was overwhelming, and his reflexes were enhanced by neural implants. Every physical advantage went to the champion. Taeyang ducked under another strike and managed to land a kick against Roth's leg. It was like kicking a brick wall. His foot screamed in pain. The next 5 minutes were a nightmare. Taeyang used every trick he knew. Dodging, redirecting force, staying mobile. But Roth was too fast, too strong. A glancing blow to Taeyang's shoulder sent him spinning. Another strike to his ribs cracked something inside. He tasted blood. In the stands, Ji-woo was on her feet, screaming for the match to stop. The officials ignored her. Velkhari honor demanded the fight continue until someone surrendered or fell unconscious. Lyra watched with her hands gripping the armrests of her throne so tightly that the metal bent. She had seen hundreds of combat trials, but this felt different. Every time Roth's fist connected with Taeyang, she felt a strange pain in her chest. Taeyang hit the ground hard. Roth stood over him, raising his fist for a finishing blow. The crowd roared its approval. This was the climax they had come to see, but Taeyang did something no one expected. He stopped trying to fight. Instead, he looked up at Roth and spoke. "Why do you fight?" Roth paused, his fist still raised. "What? Why do you fight?" Taeyang repeated. Coughing blood. Who are you when you're not in this arena? Coughing blood. Who are you when you're not in this arena? I am Champion Roth, the warrior replied, confused. No, Taeyang said, struggling to sit up. That's your title. Who are you? Do you have family? Friends? Dreams beyond this? The arena went silent. No one had ever stopped a combat trial to ask the champion personal questions. Roth lowered his fist slightly. I don't understand what you're asking. I'm asking if you're more than a weapon, Taeyang said. He forced himself to stand, swaying on his feet. I'm asking if anyone has ever looked at you and seen a person, instead of a fighter. Something changed in Roth's expression. For 200 years, he had been the undefeated champion. People feared him, respected him, used him. But no one had ever asked him about himself. I was a farmer once, Roth said quietly. Before the neural implants, before the crystallization treatments, I grew things. I had a mate and 2 children. What happened to them? Taeyang asked. They died in a Drayan raid 70 years ago. I became a warrior to protect others from the same fate. Roth looked at his crystalline hands. But I've been fighting so long. I forgot what I was protecting. I forgot who I was. Taeyang nodded slowly. You're still that farmer. The warrior is just armor you wear. But armor can come off. Roth stared at this strange, fragile human who had somehow seen past centuries of violence to the person buried underneath. In the entire history of the combat trials, no opponent had ever tried to understand him. I yield, Roth said. The crowd erupted in chaos. Some shouted in anger, others in shock. Champions didn't yield. It was unthinkable. But Roth had made his choice. He reached down and pulled Taeyang to his feet. You won by making me remember who I am. That's a greater victory than any combat. Kale shot to his feet. His face twisted with rage. This is a violation of tradition. The human used trickery, not skill, but Emperor Torin raised his hand for silence. The old ruler looked at Taeyang with something like wonder. No, he used the highest skill of all understanding. The trial is complete. The human has passed all 3 tests. Medical staff rushed to help Taeyang. His ribs were cracked, his shoulder was dislocated, and he had a concussion. But he was smiling as they carried him away on a stretcher. Lyra tried to follow, but her father stopped her. We need to talk, daughter. Now, in the private council chamber, Emperor Torin looked exhausted. The Drayan Consortium has issued an ultimatum. They know about your oath. They see your refusal of Prince Vex as an insult. They're demanding you marry him as originally planned, or they will blockade our trade routes. They can't do that, Lyra protested. They can, and they will. Her father pulled up a holographic display showing military positions. Their fleets are already moving into position. If this turns into a war, millions will die. Our outer colonies will be the first casualties. So you want me to break my oath? Lyra's voice was cold. I want you to save your people, Torin said. I'm giving you 1 lunar cycle. Find another solution, or accept the marriage. I'm sorry, daughter, but I won't sacrifice billions for one person's freedom, even if that person is my child. Lyra left the chamber feeling like she was drowning. The walls of the palace seemed to press in on her from all sides. She walked blindly through the corridors until she found herself in the medical wing where Taeyang was being treated. He was sitting up in bed, his torso wrapped in regeneration bandages. When he saw her face, he knew something was terribly wrong. What happened? She told him everything. The ultimatum, the blockade, the impossible choice. As she spoke, tears formed in her violet eyes. Velkari rarely cried. Their crystalline biology made it difficult. But Lyra was crying now. I thought I had found freedom, she whispered. But I'm still trapped. Either I break my oath and lose myself, or I keep my oath and watch my people suffer. There's no way out. Taeyang was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Can I tell you something humans believe? Taeyang. What? We believe that when someone gives you two bad choices, you should look for a third option they haven't thought of. There is no third option, Lyra said bitterly. There's always a third option. We just have to find it. Taeyang shifted in the bed, wincing. Tell me about the Drayan. What do they really want? Power, control, wealth. Then why do they want you to marry Prince Vex? Lyra paused. To unite our territories, to control our trade routes. So it's not about you, Taeyang said. It's about resources and economics. The marriage is just a means to an end. So what? That doesn't change anything. It changes everything, Taeyang said with growing excitement. If what they really want is economic advantage, we give it to them in a different way. We make war more expensive than peace. We make cooperation more profitable than conquest. How? Lyra asked, but her mind was already racing. I don't know yet, Taeyang admitted. But we have a lunar cycle to figure it out. And we have something they don't expect. Ruve. What's that? A human who thinks sideways, and a princess who refuses to give up. He reached out and took her hand. The touch sent a strange sensation through both of them. We'll find the third option. Lyra. Together. She looked at their joined hands, crystalline and flesh, alien and human. Something about it felt right, in a way she couldn't explain. Together, she repeated softly. That night, an emergency alert blared through the palace. Drayan warships had appeared at the edge of Valkyrie space. The blockade had begun early. The lunar cycle had just become a few days. Lyra and Taeyang looked at each other across the medical bay. The impossible had just become urgent, but neither of them looked away. If they were going to find a miracle, they needed to start now. Taeyang stood in the war room, surrounded by Valkyrie military leaders who looked at him like he was an insect. His ribs still ached from the fight with Roth. But there was no time to rest. The Drayan blockade had cut off 3 major trade routes, and supply shipments to the outer colonies had stopped. This is your plan? General Yuna asked, her crystalline face showing clear disgust. Send a human to negotiate? The Drayan will laugh at us. Let them laugh, Taeyang said, pointing at the holographic star map. While they're laughing, I'll be showing them numbers. The Drayan respect one thing above all else: profit. Right now, they think war will make them rich. I'm going to prove cooperation will make them richer. Emperor Torin studied the human. You're asking us to trust you with the fate of our empire. No, Taeyang corrected. I'm asking you to trust that greed is predictable. The Drayan aren't evil. They're businessmen. And businessmen can be negotiated with. Lyra stepped forward. I'm going with him. Absolutely not, her father said. You're the princess. We need you here to coordinate defenses. Ah, then send Lady Bo-Ra as my representative, Lyra said. Bo-Ra was her oldest advisor and friend. A practical woman who had served the royal family for 300 years. But I want something else. I want to establish a telepathic link with Taeyang. Unquote. I want to state Wei. I want to state Yang. The room went silent. Telepathic linking was intimate, reserved for mates and the closest family members. It required opening your mind completely to another person. The human doesn't have telepathic abilities, General Yuna protested. But I do, Lyra said firmly. A one-way link will let me sense his emotions and general thoughts. If he's in danger, I'll know. If he needs help, I can guide him. Taeyang wasn't sure how he felt about someone being in his head, but he nodded. If it helps, I'm willing. The linking ceremony was done in private. Lyra placed her hands on either side of Taeyang's head. Her crystalline fingers cool against his skin. He felt a strange pressure building behind his eyes. Then suddenly his thoughts were no longer entirely his own. It wasn't like she could read his mind exactly. It was more like she could feel what he felt, sense the general direction of his thoughts. And to his surprise, he could feel her too, a distant presence that radiated determination and fear in equal measure. "I can sense you," he said, amazed. "The link worked partially," Lyra said, pulling her hands away. She looked shaken. "Your mind is so different. So loud with thoughts and feelings all happening at once. How do humans think clearly with so much chaos?" "We're used to it," Taeyang said with a slight smile. "Maybe the chaos is what makes us creative." 2 hours later, Taeyang stood on the bridge of Horizon's Promise with Ji-woo, Lady Bo-Ra, and a small Valkyrie crew. They were preparing to jump into Drayan space under a flag of negotiation. "This is crazy," Ji-woo muttered. "We're flying into enemy territory with nothing but math and hope." "That's how humanity has always operated," Taeyang replied. He could feel Lyra's presence at the edge of his mind, a warm anchor in the darkness. The jump to Drayan space took 6 hours. When they emerged, they were immediately surrounded by warships. A communication channel opened, showing a Drayan commander with gray skin and 4 eyes. "You are trespassing," the commander said. "We request an audience with Prince Vex and the Drayan High Council," Lady Bo-Ra announced. "We come under diplomatic protocols with a proposal." The Drayan commander's 4 eyes narrowed. But he couldn't refuse a proper diplomatic request without violating galactic law. "You have 1 hour. If your proposal is unsatisfactory, you will be detained." They were escorted to a massive station orbiting the Drayan homeworld. Prince Vex met them in a council chamber that was all sharp edges and dark metal. He was tall and lean, with a calculating expression. "A human and an old advisor," Vex said with amusement. "Princess Lyra sends her servants to do her negotiating?" "I'm not a servant," Taeyang said calmly. "I'm an engineer with a business proposition. I don't negotiate with primitives." "Then you're going to lose a lot of money," Taeyang replied. He activated a holographic display from the portable projector Ji-woo had set up. "This shows current Drayan trade income, projected costs of war with the Valkyrie, and alternative profit scenarios." Number. Numbers and charts filled the air. Taeyang walked through them methodically, showing how a war would cost trillions in military expenses, lost trade, and damaged infrastructure. Then he showed the alternative, a 3-way trade alliance between humans, Valkyrie, and Drayan that would triple everyone's profits within 5 years. "Humans have something you need," Taeyang continued. "We have faster-than-light communication technology that's more efficient than anything currently in use. We have medical advances that could extend lifespans. We have agricultural techniques that could feed billions. And we're willing to share all of it through proper trade agreements." "You're trying to bribe us," Vex said. But his tone had shifted from amusement to interest. "I'm trying to make you rich," Taeyang corrected. "War makes weapons dealers rich. Peace makes everyone rich. Which would you prefer?" Taeyang. "War makes weapons dealers. War makes weapons dealers. War makes weapons. War makes weapons." For 2 hours, they negotiated. Taeyang demonstrated the communication technology, transmitted medical research data, and answered technical questions. The Drayan High Council joined the meeting, their 4 eyes gleaming with interest. But Prince Vex wasn't satisfied. "This is all very interesting," he said, "but it doesn't address the fundamental issue. I was promised a royal marriage to unite our peoples. I was promised Princess Lyra." "You were promised political advantage," Lady Bo-Ra said quietly. "This gives you far more." "It gives me money," Vex replied. "Not honor. Not the prestige of uniting 2 royal houses." He stood. "I challenge the human to single combat. If he defeats me, we accept the trade alliance. If I defeat him, the princess marries me as originally planned, and the blockade continues until she agrees." Taeyang felt Lyra's alarm through their link. She was trying to send him a warning, but the distance made it unclear. All he felt was her fear for him. "I accept," Taeyang said, ignoring Ji-woo's horrified gasp. "Are you insane?" his sister demanded. "You just fought Roth 2 days ago. You're injured." "I'll be fine," Taeyang lied. Through his link with Lyra, he could feel her reaching out to him, trying to send strength across the void of space. The duel was set for the next day. That night, Tae-yang meditated in his quarters, trying to center himself. The link with Lyra was growing stronger. He could feel her presence more clearly now, and she could sense his thoughts. "You don't have to do this." Her voice seemed to whisper in his mind. It wasn't real speech, just an impression of her feelings, translated into words his brain could understand. "Yes, I do," he thought back. "This is the third option. We show them that courage and intelligence matter more than tradition. You might die. Everyone dies eventually, but not everyone lives." He thought about what he'd said to her in the garden. "I'd rather have one real moment than a century of emptiness." He felt her emotions wash over him: fear, admiration, and something else. Something that felt like the beginning of love, fragile and new and terrifying. The next morning, Tae-yang faced Prince Vex in a combat arena, similar to the one on Velkar Prime. But this time, he had something different. This time, he had Lyra's presence in his mind, and through their link, he could feel her strength flowing into him. It wasn't enough to match Vex physically. The prince was fast and skilled, but Lyra's tactical mind helped Tae-yang predict movements, and her determination gave him the will to keep fighting when his body wanted to quit. The battle raged for 20 minutes. Tae-yang took more hits than he gave, but he didn't fall. And then Ji-woo did something unexpected. She activated a device from Horizon's Promise, a neural disruptor that briefly scrambled telepathic abilities. In the moment of confusion, Tae-yang didn't strike to kill. Instead, he disarmed Vex and held a blade to the prince's throat. "Yield," Tae-yang said, breathing hard. "Not because you lost, but because this whole fight is pointless. We can all win if you just let go of your pride." Vex stared up at this impossible human who had somehow survived. Then, slowly, he smiled. "I yield. You fight like a businessman negotiating a contract, dirty and practical." He laughed. "I like it. The alliance is accepted." The Drayan blockade began to withdraw within hours. Tae-yang collapsed in his quarters, barely conscious from pain and exhaustion. But through his link with Lyra, he felt her joy like sunlight breaking through clouds. Tae-yang woke in the medical bay of Horizon's Promise with every part of his body screaming in pain. Ji-woo sat beside his bed, her eyes red from crying. "You're an idiot," she said, punching his arm lightly. "A brave, brilliant idiot." "Did it work?" he asked, his voice rough. "The Drayans signed the alliance treaty 2 hours ago. The blockade is gone." "You did it." She smiled through her tears. "You saved an empire with spreadsheets and stubbornness." The journey back to Velkar Prime took 3 days. During that time, the telepathic link between Tae-yang and Lyra grew stronger. He would wake in the night feeling her emotions, her relief, her joy, and underneath it all, a growing warmth that he recognized because he felt the same thing. They were falling in love, and it terrified both of them. When Horizon's Promise docked at the Velkari Palace, Lyra was waiting. She stood on the landing platform, surrounded by officials and guards, her crystalline skin catching the light of 3 suns. But the moment Tae-yang emerged from the ship, she broke protocol completely and ran to him. She stopped just before reaching him, suddenly uncertain. They had shared minds but never truly touched except during the linking ceremony. "Hi," Tae-yang said softly. "Hi," she replied. Then, without thinking, she hugged him. Her crystalline body was cool and hard against his, but gentle. Through their link, Tae-yang felt everything she felt: relief that he was alive, joy that he had returned, and love that had been growing since the moment he asked Roth about his dreams. The watching crowd gasped. Physical affection in public was not Velkari custom, especially for royalty. But neither Tae-yang nor Lyra cared. That evening, Emperor Torin called a formal gathering of the court. The throne room was packed with nobles, all whispering about the human who had achieved the impossible. "Engineer Tae-yang," the emperor said, his voice carrying through the hall. "You have fulfilled the conditions of my daughter's oath. Whether you intended to or not, you bested her in strategy through your stalemate. You defeated her champion, Roth, by winning his respect. And through your telepathic link, you have proven you understand her heart." The crowd stirred with excitement and disapproval in equal measure. By our oldest laws, Torin continued, you have won the right to Princess Lyra's hand in marriage, but I am an old emperor who has learned that tradition is not always wisdom. He looked at his daughter, then at Taeyang. I will not enforce any claim. Instead, I ask you directly, human. What do you wish? Every eye in the room fixed on Taeyang. He could feel Lyra's nervousness through their link, her fear of what he might say. Taeyang stepped forward and bowed to the emperor. Then he turned to face Lyra. Your Highness, he said formally, I release you from any obligation your oath might have created. You owe me nothing. You are free to choose your own path, as you always should have been. Confusion rippled through the crowd. He was giving up the greatest prize in the empire? But, Taeyang continued, looking directly into Lyra's violet eyes. If you want to build something together, not because law demands it, not because politics requires it, but because we choose each other, then I would be honored to stand beside you, not as your owner or your obligation, but as your partner and equal. Lyra felt tears forming again. Through their link, she could feel that he meant every word. He truly was giving her the choice, with no pressure, no expectations. She walked down from the platform, each step feeling like crossing a bridge between two lives. When she reached Taeyang, she took his hands in hers. 3 months ago, I swore I would never take a husband, she said, her voice clear and strong. I swore it, because I thought marriage meant losing myself. But you showed me something I never understood. She looked around the court. Love isn't about possession. Partnership isn't about dominance. And choosing someone doesn't mean surrendering who you are. It means becoming more than you were alone. She turned back to Taeyang. I am Princess Lyra, heir to the Velkhari Empire, warrior and leader of my people. And I choose you, Taeyang, not because you won me, but because you set me free. The throne room erupted. Some nobles cheered, others protested. Ambassador Kale looked like he had swallowed something sour. But Emperor Torin was smiling, really smiling, for the first time in years. Then let it be known throughout the empire, he declared. Princess Lyra has made her choice freely, and by doing so, has honored both her oath and her heart. The wedding ceremony was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. It blended Velkhari traditions with human customs, creating something entirely new. Lyra wore robes that combined crystalline Velkhari design with flowing human fabrics. Taeyang wore formal clothes that incorporated both cultures. Champion Roth stood as Taeyang's honor guard. Lady Bora served as Lyra's witness. Jiwoo cried openly throughout the entire ceremony, which confused and fascinated the Velkhari guests who weren't used to seeing tears of joy. When Taeyang and Lyra spoke their vows, they did so in both languages, their voices mixing like different instruments in harmony. And when they sealed their union with a kiss, the telepathic link between them blazed so brightly that every Velkhari in the room could feel it pure joy, unfiltered and overwhelming. The celebration lasted 3 days. Humans and Velkhari mingled, sharing food and stories. Drayan merchants arrived with gifts, eager to begin the new trade alliance. Even Prince Vex attended, bringing expensive wines and a grudging respect. On the final night, Taeyang and Lyra stood on a private balcony overlooking the capital city. The 3 moons of Velkhar were rising, painting the sky in shades of purple and silver. I've been thinking, Lyra said quietly, about something you said once. About only living once. What about it? I have centuries ahead of me, she said. And he heard the sadness in her voice. And you have maybe 50 or 60 years if you're lucky. That's not even a fraction of my life. Taeyang had been thinking about this too. It was the shadow behind all their happiness, the knowledge that he would age and die while she remained young. Their time together would be brief by Velkhari standards. I know, he said. And I won't lie and say it doesn't scare me. But humans have a different way of looking at time. What do you mean? We measure life by depth, not length, Taeyang explained. A human who lives 80 years experiencing nothing has less life than someone who lives 40 years experiencing everything. It's not about how much time you have, it's about what you do with it. Lyra leaned against him. "Teach me," she whispered. "Teach me to live like a human, to make every moment count. Only if you teach me to think like a Velkari," Taeyang replied. "To see the long patterns. To understand patience. Deal." She kissed him softly. Through their link, they felt each other's love and fear and hope all mixed together. Months passed. The alliance between humans, Velkari, and Drayan grew stronger. Taeyang and Lyra worked together to create new policies that valued individual choice and cultural exchange. Ambassador Kale, surprisingly, became one of their strongest supporters after seeing how the changes benefited everyone. Jiwoo took a position as the official human liaison to the Velkari court, which meant she could stay near her brother. She and Lady Bora became unlikely friends, the young human pilot and the ancient Velkari advisor, bonding over shared exasperation with their respective family members' romantic drama. Champion Roth retired from combat and started a school teaching both Velkari and humans. He said that Taeyang had reminded him what strength really meant, not just physical power, but the courage to be vulnerable. 1 year after their wedding, Lyra and Taeyang stood on the bridge of Horizon's Promise, as it prepared to depart on a new mission. The ship had been upgraded with both Velkari and human technology, and its crew was now mixed humans and Velkari working together. "Ready?" Jiwoo asked from the pilot's seat. Taeyang looked at his wife, his partner, his equal. She smiled at him, and through their link, he felt her excitement and love. "Ready," they said together. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, heading toward new adventures and unknown challenges, Taeyang thought about that first day when he had saved a stranded princess. He had changed the galaxy, not through weapons or force, but through understanding and choice. The alien princess had sworn she would never take a husband, and she never did. Instead, she had chosen a partner. And that made all the difference. Far below, on Velkar Prime, Emperor Torin watched the ship disappear into the stars. His daughter was happy. His empire was at peace, and he had learned that sometimes the greatest wisdom was knowing when to let tradition change. The 3 moons rose higher, casting their light on a galaxy that was learning, slowly, to choose love over law, partnership over possession, and courage over tradition. It was a good beginning, and for humans and Velkari alike, that was enough.